So, alright then. So this scenario is supposed to be about these two task forces kind of going at it. So we got Kirov, Udaloy, various other good stuff. Got some subs. We've covered our subs book already. What we could do is we could use these example task forces to kind of do airstrikes. I can't remember if you have 2 or 3 by default, but we'll set 3 because that should get job done. So that would be a full division of backfires, which would be absolutely best thing Russians could have. On the action and turn sequence, you go down to air units, which is the second box down, and you receive 1 or more strike units fly an airstrike. And in the top right, it says each unit costs 1 ops, unless stated. So to fly all 3, it costs 3 ops. You'd move your ops down 3 boxes, and then you'd fly your airstrike. And so they'd fly at 1 zone to where I've put them because the bases are just off board, 2 zones to there, and then 3 zones to there, and then they'd attack Task Force Ranger. Generally, what would happen is there'd be maybe a Phantom out here, but we'll just do a straight attack first, just to see how bad it is. These guys at range 3, they fire 6 missiles each, so these guys are going to fire 18 missiles versus a SAM defense of 5. So there's really no way that Ranger can shoot all those down if they get through. But let's see if they get through. Fighters versus strike aircraft. So it's the brown sheet, attacked by fighters, cap and intercept. Roll all fighter dice with 1 fighter for each strike unit. Cap must come from the target task force unless better fighters are available. Okay, so this Tomcat would roll 4 dice and adds +2 because it's really, really good. It's not spent. There's no damage. So you roll your 4 dice and see how you do. So let's try that. 2 dice, 4 dice. So what we're doing here is we're trying to roll against the backfire's defense, which is bottom left. So you're trying to roll 10s. In this case, we've got a 9, an 8, a 10, an 11 actually. It's a 9 +2. There's no natural rolls. There's a natural 9, but that don't count in this case because they're not bombing. And there's no natural 1s and 2s. So there's a few little ends to check before you go on. And then what would happen is you'd record the number of missiles that have come in because nothing's been knocked down on the way. So there's 18 missiles coming in. And then after that, the Tomcat would score its 1 hit, its mark. And then you'd resolve 18 missiles versus 5. So what's going to happen is the Americans might shoot down 4 or 5 and then they get obliterated because they're not up to task of defending against that. There's too many incoming missiles. I think this task force could defend this land base. And the reason for that is because we're not sure where this task force is. It could be right up here, miles away, or it could be right in here, just kind of snuggling in into stone away. Yeah, I'm positive it's that way around. So what would happen in that result is that this task force would probably just get destroyed. So let's make it a little bit more interesting. And let's unflip that guy. And this time, as they come through, it's still a big strike. But this time, as they come through, we're going to have a unit of Phantoms out on patrol. So we'll have 1 there and 1 there. And so what you've done by placing them in these 2 different zones, this guy's got a range of 2, which allows him to get range of 1, range 2. This guy's got a range of 1, which allows him to get to this zone but no further. But what you've done by putting them in these 2 zones is there's no way around. If you'd only covered this zone, Russian could go Barents Sea, north, and then down, and skip your fighters. But by doing that, he's got to choose to go through 1. So let's say he's going to pick this one. It really don't matter. They're both 3 dice, which is bottom number. Oh, there's an extra Phantom there. You can make 1 zone really bad. So we're going to do 3 dice at +1. And that's kind of free. That's just because you're out on intercept. You've paid to go out on intercept, so that would have cost 1 op, 2 ops. Would have been 2 separate actions to put them on. So this guy's going to roll 3 dice. No, he's not. He's on intercept. He's going to roll 2 dice. And that's because he's ferrying and stuff like that, not all out. So a 10 would kill a step for backfires before they get to target. And the 8 wouldn't do anything. And then they'd move on. And then that would make this cap roll worse because now the detector had been spotted by somebody. And so this cap, wherever he is, there he is, let's pull him out. So this Tomcat then would roll an extra dice, I think it is. Protected by interceptors +1 dice. So he'd now roll 5 dice at +2. So really what you want to do is you want to detect people before they get to you and then make your defense better. He's rolled a couple of 9s. It's still not rolled very well, even with extra dice. He did roll a 1 or a 2. with Tomcats shoots down missiles. So that's a representation of Phoenix missiles, anti-missile capability, and they can shoot down things that are coming in. However, the real lesson from all of this is don't go under an air umbrella that you can't deal with. You know, if there's a potential to lob 18 missiles at you and you've only got 5 SAMs, then you're dead. You just not realize you're dead yet. And what will happen is you'll tool around, and eventually they'll get you. Eventually they'll detect you, and they'll sink you because you can't possibly defend against it. And that's quite an important lesson, really, in terms of the game. A lot of the game really is about in risk management. So knowing how good the other guy is, and then putting yourself in the right place or in the wrong place. If you had 2 carriers in the same spot, then you suddenly become twice as difficult to work because actually this carrier group can protect this carrier group because we don't know where they are in the sea. And also, you can split potentially your detections up amongst 2 different groups. So if you've got poor detections on both groups, that's not as easy to target as if you had a good detection on a group. So the other bit that I forgot to mention because it's at the bottom of the sheet is that when Cap kills things, you get a save against it. Now, you never get a save against interceptors, but you do get a save against Cap. And the reason for that is if you detected this group, then you know where it is. Even if it's in a rough box, you still know where it is, which means that your plotters, your people who are planning this attack, can draw an even bigger box and know roughly where the Cap is. So they've got a rough idea that, yeah, there's probably F-14s in this 300-mile zone. And so they know when to turn the radars on, they know when to look for enemy and things like that. So there's a save against all Cap attacks, but there is no save against interception. So interception is really good because it kills stuff before it gets to target. It makes other Cap better, and it's not savable. Whereas Cap can be really good, and certainly 2 F-14s can absolutely savage any strike if they roll really well. But the other guy will get a save against them as well, and that then depends on how good your detection values are. Okay, so that's kind of airstrikes against ships. We could do an example of trying to detect these guys. So if these are both there, and this is we've already kind of covered it, but let's do it again with a Bear D, a little bit more fun. So this is the best Russian detection asset, apart from Ross, that's their good too. But these get 2 dice against ships, against task forces. And they've got a range of 6. So from his home, which is probably up here, he should be up in these bases. 1 zone, 2 zones, 3 zones, 4 zones, 5 zones, 6. He can fly all the way across the map and nearly all the way back again. And that's his effective range. At that point, he can then perform a mission. So what he could do is he could fly through this zone. Oops, I've done that wrong way around. Hold on. He could fly from Barentson, he could fly through this zone, at which point this Phantom would get a chance to have a Popperton as he runs through the zone. And you've got, again, on the attacks by fighters, the brown sheet, fighter combat versus maritime patrol. So he would roll some dice to attack. Or he can box clever. If he starts from here, sorry about that. Just kill that. If he starts from here, there's a line, a black line, all the way around that says overfly the Arctic. So he's going to fly 1 zone into Barents Sea from his bases over here. Then he's going to use this line and fly +2 zones. So he's going to fly 3 zones. And what he's done is he's flown across the Arctic, re-entered the board up here somewhere, and flown 3 zones. And then he's going to fly 4 zones. So he's just going to avoid these interceptors because we know that they're on the board, you can see them. And the reason that they're on the board and you can see them is because they probably would know they were there. You know, they're banging away with radar, there'd be AWACS, and all sorts of things. They make a ton of electromagnetic noise. So this guy's going to fly all the way around, and he's going to go and try and get to his actual targets. And he's really going to do that every time because he's range 6. So even if he has to go right over here, let's say this. What we got? Let's say these eagles. Kind of, they know that's going to happen, so they're going to cover that. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he can still get there. So if you're going to play in this kind of area, this is kind of your danger zone. East 9, 10, East 6. Russians can easily get to these areas, and they can get to these areas in a number of different ways. So, alright, fighter combat versus maritime patrol. He's arrived in this zone. He completely bypassed any interceptors. Tomcats are now going to try and spot him before he does his job. So, roll air to air dice -2 with 1 fresh fighter. So, it doesn't matter that there's 2 fresh fighters there. It won't matter if there were 6. You only get to roll with one because you don't know he's there, and he's super good at this. This is what he's built for. So he usually gets 4 dice, but he rolls his dice -2, so he gets 2 dice. But he's going to add his tactical value to that. So 2 dice at +2. Still not bad. He's rolled a pair of 7s, which is a pair of 9s. And against planes, a 9 or above is -1 search per dice. So actually, 2 9s takes 2 dice off this guy, off this bear, who only had 2 dice in the first place. So that'd put him up, and he'd then return to his base, and he's been unsuccessful. If only 1 9 had been rolled, he'd lose 1 dice. But because he's got 2, he still gets to roll a dice. And he'd roll it on the blue sheet, detection of task forces. The other thing about maritime patrol is you need a natural 10 to shoot an aeroplane down. So even for a Tomcat that's really, really lethal, shoot a Bear D down because it's designed to operate against Tomcats, you need a 10. So that's how you're going to spot them. And basically what you're going to do is in this kind of scenario where there's 2 task groups, maybe you'll go out and what just happened will happen. The first guy will not do his job, but then there's going to be another one go out. And sooner or later, you're going to start placing poor detections. There's also raw stats and other mechanisms to place detections. But the kind of key rule for detections is that depending on what you roll, depends on who places the detection. So if you roll the blue sheet, detection of task forces, if you roll a 3, 4, or a 5, you get a poor detection. So you can upgrade any poor detection first if you want to, but there aren't any. Then it says placed by task force owner, the American in this case, because he's going to pick whichever one he thinks is the best, or whichever one he thinks he wants you to attack, or the one he can afford to lose, or whatever it is. And then he's going to give you a poor detection because it's American player choice. Because the result says placed by task force owner, unless you're upgraded. If you rolled that again, so we had exactly the same result, now Russian gets to choose because he could choose to upgrade this. And that's because he knows this is it, or he knows roughly where it is. So he could say, I'm going to make you upgrade that first. I'm going to detect this guy properly. Or he could not do that, and he could let the American place, in which case, again, Americans now got a choice. Does he upgrade that one? Does he give that one away? Or does he make them both poor detections? And with better rolls, you get better results. So 6, 7, or 8 is placed by the rolling player. And 9 or 10 is an automatic good detection. You just go, I'm going to choose which one you want. So that's how you place detections. And without detections, you're not attacking task forces because you don't know where they are. But in a scenario like that, where you have 2 poor detections, you could attack either one. You won't get any benefits. If anything, you're only going to get negatives. But you would still get a save against cap shots because you still know that they're there. You don't know exactly where they are, but you've got a rough idea of where they are. So you get an 8+ save against shooting cap if it's not the strike target. So really, what you want to do is if you're gonna put your priceless backfires into stuff, you don't want to take chances. You want to lock these guys up. You want detections. Then you want to make sure you've got a route where you fight the lowest number of interceptors, and then you want to put enough missiles in to do the job. So in this scenario, we've got a poor detection. You only know if there's an AMF there, if there's a convoy there, and if there's a fighter there. So all the American would have to say is Task Force Ranger has got an F-14 Tomcat. And that's all you would know. There's no amphib. You know there's no amphib there. You know there's no convoy there. But it's an F-14 Tomcat. And you only put 1 on. So you know there's at least 1 carrier there, but there might be 2 or 3. You have no idea. And you don't know anything. You know the same thing about this group. So you know maybe that there were another F-14 there. So what that means is you can be sneaky about how you form your groups. Maybe if you're going to put like a scenario like this, maybe you put both carriers in the same task force. Then you don't have to reveal how many carriers there are if a task force gets detected. But you'll still get to use your Tomcats to defend either task force as long as they stick together. And it also means that you could dump, assuming you get the choice, you could actually save your carriers in an unhidden state and intentionally let the guy detect the thing that you know that if he comes in, you're going to snot him because you've got 2 carriers that are hiding. So there's all kind of sneaky ways you can build task forces and sneaky plans you can kind of play. Okay, that's pretty much air to surface in terms of attacking task forces and how missiles work. And that's cap, and we've done a bit of interception. And that's all on the brown sheet. Again, just working top to bottom. really on each interaction. Really, I suppose it's just knowing when to do each interaction. And again, though, that is all on A. A units are intercepted when entering a zone with a fighter, like that. The tricky bit here, or the bit that might catch people off, is you're also intercepted when you leave a zone with an enemy carrier. So if my theoretical backfires managed to get here and then flew here and then went past, they'd get intercepted by these carriers, even if they didn't know they were there because they'd not placed any poor detections. So overflying task forces that you've got no idea what they are is a really bad idea. It's really bad for you to do that because there might be F-14s in there, or even F-8s or something else that's going to shoot at you. All right, so scenario 1, Boomer Bastion. Basically, it says it's day 1 of World War III. 7 NATO assets have been held back, and you're gonna go and attack this bastion. That's what you're trying to do. So you win the game by sinking 8 SSBN payload. So that's the number in the little red triangles pointing upwards on the Soviet boomers. The Soviet can reduce the current payload sunk by 1 for each Soviet submarine that makes it over the SOSUS line. So you can kind of break out to try and attack a passing convoy. And NATO can also add a payload value if they sink the Kiev. So this uses the small scenario ops track, and NATO gets 5 and Soviets get 7. So I'm not sure. We can't really show that, can we? So I'll just have to kind of play with that in front of me, I guess. So if you've got a physical copy of the game, I'm just looking for my little sheet. It did come with a little small scenario, which is like a little cut off. It's kind of 3-inch high by about, I don't know, 8 or 9 inch wide. So I'm going to play off that so I can tell where I'm up to. It is in this module, but it's in a different window, so I'm not sure we can show it. I'm going to get a red dice and a blue dice. I'll just tell you when I'm moving. I'll just describe what I'm doing. All right, so NATO starts with 5 ops, so blue dice goes on 5, and Russians start with 7 ops, so red dice goes on 7. And what that means is we've already gone past the fast move and we've already gone past the repairs, so we could implement them straight away. And as soon as Russians spend a point, which will be the first thing that they do, we'll then do the ships event because it says ships on the space that the Russians are on. Hopefully that'll make more sense in a minute when I make my first turn. So there's on the little small scenario ops track, under the number 7, it says ships. And what that means is once both players have gone past that, you resolve the ships. So Russians start, and Russians get to spend the point first. Let me get on my quick play sheets. Yeah. So Russian job really in this scenario is to not lose. Because ships are going to move first, you could form a task force knowing that ships are going to immediately move, but I'll not do that. I'll wait and we'll see how it goes. I'll not roll for weather either on the first turn. We'll just spin through. So this bear F is going to set off. He's going to fly from these air bases and go 1 and then 2, and he's going to go hunting, I think, Norwegian Sea. Now, if there were any fighters out here, he'd have to see if he got shot down, but there's no fighters. So he's just going to roll these 3 dice, which is middle right hand side. And he's got potentially a Coburn and a Los Angeles that he could kill. So we're on the blue sheet because this is all submarines. And we're going to roll 3 dice. And I got 3, 7, and 8, which is not enough to kill anything. And this doesn't have any pluses. So he becomes spent. And he goes back to his holding box. And we'll move the Russian dice down from 7 down to 6, the ops marker down from 7 down to 6. And it's now the American turn. Ships would move, but there aren't any ships that are at sea. So it's American turn. And what are we going to do? We've got a Nimrod here and a potential target at Alpha. So let's go and hunt that Alpha. So he gets 3 dice in anti-submarine warfare and he's looking for 9s. Throw some dice. Got a pair of 10s. So that's 2 hits. The only possible target is that Alpha. So Alpha's been hit twice. Now, because of the natural 10s that I've rolled, I can choose from about halfway down anti-submarine warfare table. I can choose one of the options in the N10 box. But for this scenario, the only one possible is to hit a submarine. So it's a save submarine, which is right on the bottom of the sheet. Save. Ignore any 8 on the roll of a 6. So the Russian player is going to roll 1 dice, and he gets a 7, and he dodges the torpedo, and then he gets a 1, and he finds that torpedo. So Alpha takes a step loss. So that was the American-British point, so we're down to from 5 down to 4. This Nimrod rolled his dice, so he goes back home and he's spent 2. Russian turn. We want to get another bear effort, but this time we're going to go on patrol in Barents Sea. So you could put an on patrol marker on him, but you don't need to, because whenever you see an aircraft out at sea, he's on patrol. So that's the full Russian turn, and he's just going to sit there until he does something. Okay, American turn next. I guess we should send somebody up to the bastion, really. So let's 1, 2. It's a bit far. So 1. This guy can reach. This switcher can reach, and this Los Angeles can reach because you can move 2 zones and then attack. So it would be 1 into Barents Sea, and then 1 into Boomer Bastion. So yeah, come on, let's try that. So the switcher, he could roll his dice and try and attack this November first, but he's not gonna. He's gonna move first, so he's gonna move 1 zone and then another zone up this arrow, 2 zones, and then he's gonna roll his dice. But before he does, because he's moved into an hydrophone zone, they can intercept him and try and kill him. So I use my best asset first, which is that Victor 3. I'm gonna mark him spent, and Victor's gonna roll 3 dice at +1. And because it's an iPhone interruption, you can have an extra die, or you can roll just a single die and not be spent, because that's another option. We're not going to do that though. We're going to go all in. We're going to roll 4 dice. So I've rolled 1 natural 10, which is good for a hit on the switcher. The switcher's got a little roundel around his save number, so he gets a 6+ save, and he rolls a 7, so the switcher doesn't get killed. And then he can roll it. That's this Russian's. This Victor 3's finished his turn, or finished his interception, I should say. And then Swiftshow can roll his 3 dice at +1. And we got a pair of 2s and a 6. So any double less than a 10, which is what he rolled because he got 2 2s, but that only applies to a Soviet sub. So British don't have rocket torpedoes. And he got a 6 as well, which is really a 7 because of his plus, but a 7's not enough to kill any of these submarines. You got 8s, you got 9s, you got 10s, 9s, 10s. So not enough. So he made it into the bastion. He didn't get killed, but he didn't find anybody to kill. That was an American pulse gun, so it was from 4 to 3. It's always a good idea, actually. Always spend your ops first. Otherwise, nobody can ever remember where you spent them or not, unless you play on Vassal that records it. So try and spend your ops first. Okay, Russian turn. And I could have intercepted that, by the way. So this guy, because he moved through me, I could have intercepted that, which might have been a good idea. But I'll wait for next one. So Russian turn is going to be to get this Typhoon out of dodge. So he's really good. It's a 10 to hit him, and he gets a save. But he's also worth 8 points. So if he dies, that's it. You've lost because he carries many, many nuclear missiles. So probably the best way to keep him safe in this scenario is to just stick him in the Arctic. He's just going to go under there, and he's going to hide. He's going to turn his engines off and wait for Underworld. And that's a Russian point spent. We've got on to repairs, but there's no repairs to make. So last American point goes from 3 down to 2. Sorry, not last. 3 down to 2. There's 2 points after this. We're going to throw in. So this Sturgeon, he could have a go at this Typhoon. But if he does, they're under Arctic. He loses a die. And this guy gets a save anyway. He gets a 6+ save, which under Arctic becomes a 4+ save. So it becomes really, really difficult to kill this once it's under Arctic. It's not impossible, but there's many juicy targets waiting for us over here. So
well, just a quick question on that one. How's the best way to try to flush him out and attack him?
There isn't, I mean, to be honest, there isn't really a good way, which is kind of a problem that Americans have had for the last 30 years. And the Russian boats now, they can go to the Arctic and they're nearly untrackable. But even in this period, when Americans had a big sonar advantage, they were very difficult to find. Arctic's an enormous place for a start. And it's very difficult to find the boomerang under ice because ice is creaking and cracking and smacking against each other and all that kind of stuff. So, but in the scope of the game, really, it's roll as many dice as you can and up to roll decent numbers. There are also cards that will help you to find things under there. But I suppose the bottom line is, if you're fighting in the Arctic, then you're fighting at your worst odds so you're going to roll less dice. He's going to get his best save. So just try not to. If there are other targets, try and fight here. And if you need to go and fight under Arctic, then fine, go and do it. But it does have some disadvantages for Russians. You know, they lose their right funds. They lose a special save or a special attack that they get in the Bastion. And also, no aircraft can operate over Arctic because obviously there's an ice sheet. So the Soviets are going to kill less Americans and less British than they would if you were operating the Boomer Bastion, but they're much harder to kill. So it's kind of a game trade-off, really. Where do you want it? Like, if you've got loads of assets, if you've got loads of submarines spare, and you can afford to keep this bastion secure. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you've got, what did you start with? 1, 2, 5. You started with $5 and a Typhoon. If you could afford to put 6 subs in there and a wall or aeroplanes, then you're probably going to kill anything that comes in there after you. But if you need them assets because you want to go hunting convoys or whatever your grand strategy in the big game is, if you need them assets, then maybe Arctic's a safer place.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
But in that case, it's game over if you kill that one ship.
On this particular scenario, yeah. In the real game, it's not as bad as that. It's still pretty bad though, because 8 points, as you can see, this guy's a 4, this guy's a 6. So yeah. So in this scenario, putting Typhoon under Arctic is probably a good move. I've seen it end in a single pulse before, when an American player ran in to the bastion, rolled 2 10s, and then the Russian failed his Typhoon rolls and went, right, I've won. Obviously, it's a training scenario, so it's that's probably a good lesson in itself, really. But historically, the Typhoons would have spent most of the time under the ice. They weren't designed as first strike weapons. They were designed as revenge weapons. So they would be under the ice, and when they knew the world had ended, they would wait a month, and then they'd fire the missiles to kill any survivors.
Yeah, they were deep and slow, so they would just sit there, wait, real slow, and creep in, and then they'd drop their payload.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so in this game, I mean, we could go for that guy, but let's try and get. We've got some easy 8 boats there. They should be much easier to kill, and all we need to do is get 8 points. So they're probably preferred targets in this, in this scenario. So he's moved in. This Victor can try and kill that sturgeon, and probably should. So let's spend him, and he can do this. By the way, you can't usually do this. He can do this because of the Hydra funds. So he's going to roll usually 2 dice, but plus a dice because the Hydra fund's 3 dice. So he's going to roll 3 dice, and I've got a 5, 7, and an 8. The 8 is not a 9 because I've not got a plus on my counter, and it wouldn't matter anyway because you need a 10. So Victor looked, Victor didn't find, Sturgeon's too quiet. So Sturgeon's going to roll 3 dice at plus 1. And eventually I'll roll a decent number. Here we go. All right, this is a bit more interesting. I've rolled a natural 10, which lets him choose any target. So if Typhoon was still there, that'd be an obvious choice because, 50% way to winning game if you don't roll bad. But he's going to choose this Delta because this guy here gives him 3 points. There's no saving throw because Delta don't get a saving throw. So he just spends his turn and says bang. And that's 3 points. So 3 points are 8 that he needs to win the game. But he's also rolled a 1. Now, usually a 1 doesn't do anything. But again, if you look at your anti-submarine warfare sheet, it says for 1, if NATO is rolling, 1 step loss in the bastion. And that represents minefields, corvettes, and other assets below the kind of scale of the game. So Sturgeon here is going to take a step loss, and his defense box is not circled, so he doesn't get a save. So that is a dead American Sturgeon. So that's that spent. Russian turn then, 4 down to 3. The Russians actually are going to do 4 down to 2, and they'll form a task force up. Forming a task force costs 2 points. So I'm going to form. Usually, what you do is you get a task force marker, and you would take the ships and you would hide them so that the other guy doesn't know what's in them. But in this scenario, obviously, because that's what I've got. So they're in a task force. That cost me 2 points, which is why I went down 2. But the 3 box has ships written in it, and I moved from 4 through 3 and ended up in 2. So both players' ops markers are below the ship's marker now, which means ships can immediately move. So that task force then storms straight out into Baltic Sea, and it's on its way to go onto Boomer Bastion. So American turn. America's got 2 points left. They're going to go down to 1 point left. This LA is going to come and join party. He's going to go 1, 2. But as he does so, because there's an on patrol Bear F, who's going to spend himself and return to base and roll his dice. Bear F gets 3 dice, no plus. So 3 dice, needs 10s, didn't get a 10. LA makes it through, but there's nobody left unspent in the Bastion who can defend. They're both spent. So he's going to get, he gets through to the Bastion without any defense, and he's going to roll 3 dice at +1. We got a 6 up to a 7, which is not enough, and a 9 up to a 10, which is enough. So this time, it's not a natural 10, it's a modified 10. So the special rule doesn't trigger. So he's killed somebody though, because there's a 10 to allocate. So select any targets with a defense value equal or lower. Defender selects the first target killed. So actually, in this case, plucky Los Angeles found himself a Victor 2, because defender chooses, but not one of the actual targets he was looking for. Russian point 2 down to point 1. So at this point, they're probably gonna. Well, they've lost some stuff here actually, so they could use this November. If you remember, a scenario special rule is if you get across the Sosus line, you can reduce the payload. So let's try that. Let's try this Alpha, and he's going to sprint. What's the safest way? Probably avoiding this Los Angeles. So he's going to sprint 1 zone. He's going to sprint 2 zones, and if he survives this experience, this Orion. If he survives the Orion, who can intercept because he's gone across hydrophone line. It's the same symbol as up here, it's just on its side. Then we'll take a point off of the payload that's been killed. So let's do an anti-submarine. Again, exactly the same table, exactly the same thing, but there is one subtle difference here, because it says subs marked N cannot be killed by maritime patrol unless they roll a natural 10. So this guy's got a special hull. Actually, it will made of titanium, but N means non-magnetic. So to kill him, you need a natural 10. He's going to roll 3 dice, and he's going to roll extra dice because of an extra dice because of hydrophone interaction. So 2 dice, 4 dice, 6, 7, and a pair of 10s. So Alpha's got 2 saves to make. Rolls 1 and gets a 10 and saves. Rolls 2, gets another 10 and saves, and he's away. And miraculously gets through. And so the number of payload kills would go down from 3 down to 2. And American's now a little bit further away from winning. This guy also is used. He did his thing. He goes back to base, and he's not flipped. He is spent. All right, 1 more American point, and then we're done for this round. And the Americans are kind of looking low on assets, really. They've got a gap there, but they can't fill it because he's spent. Maybe they should go and try and kill that November. So this Los Angeles will move a zone and then attack. And he's going to roll 3 dice trying to kill that November. And he's going to roll a 10. So 1 lost bang. And then for last Russian point, because I left all over my line, that November's going to run through and escape as well. And take another payload point back. So that'll be turn 1. There's not much clean up. You take all spent markers off. And then you're ready again, and you just reset it. And I think we were at 5 and 7. And then you've run through, and this turn would be you're going to chuck a load of dice in. You can see how it's going to work. Basically, because it's such a small scenario, and it's really just trying to teach you this one concept. Well, 2 really. Concept number 1 is don't do what I did. Don't leave graphicals in your line, because people will just run straight through. And concept number 2 is when you're fighting up here, the more dice you roll, the more stuff you're going to kill, basically. So these guys in this turn are going to roll 3, 6, 8 dice. Because it's such a small scenario, they're either going to roll well and they're going to win scenario, or they're going to roll poorly and they're going to lose scenario. And that's pretty much what this one boils down to. But it does teach you fundamentals relatively.
Can you send that Los Angeles after the Trident so we can see what would happen, why it's so much harder in the Arctic?
Yeah, all right. So if he went...
Everybody's fixated on the Arctic.
Well, why don't we send them all? Let's
find that guy under the ice.
Let's see if we can kill this guy. All right, so anti-submarine warfare, exactly the same table. We've got Arctic minus a dice. So first thing we do is we lose the dice. This Los Angeles, he's going to roll 2 dice instead of his usual 3. So he rolls 2 dice, and he don't get a 10, and he's not got rocket torpedoes, so he can't claim that pair. So he's spent and he's done. Next one goes in, another 2 dice. 3 and a 6, no dice. Next one goes in, 1 dice instead of 2. Found nobody, another 8. So really had to find him. Let's assume that we had found him. Let's just say we'd found him. He rolled a natural 10, and so did he. We've got 2 detections. And normally this guy gets a 6+ save because he's got a circle around his defense. That improves to a 4+ in Arctic. So he rolls a dice. And he gets 8, and he's fine. He rolls another dice, and he gets 3, and he loses a step. Bang. But on average to do that, you're probably going to have to roll more dice than we've got here. Unless you're lucky. So, kind of under Arctic, you're really just kind of open for luck. You're open to roll natural 10s. There's not really a lot else. I mean, we could play it through, but like I say, it's really, because it's such a small scenario, you're really chucking dice trying to roll.
Sure.
What I rolled trying to kill this guy then, what did we get? We got a 3 and a 6, which would have been 7, which is not enough. We got a couple of, 2 10s. I don't know, let's do it the other way around. Let's see how it works this way around. We'll just ignore these Russian defenders for a minute, just to get an idea of how much damage you can do. So if this Sturgeon goes first on 2 dice, because he's not -1 dice, he's on his regular 2 dice, he gets a 6 and a 7, which is nothing but 7 because of his +1 makes an 8. That's enough to kill one of these deltas, but defender selects the first target killed. Now, he can't allocate it to any of his defensive submarines because they're too quiet, the 10s and 9s. So he's got no choice but to allocate it to that 8 sub, which is bad for Russian, because he didn't want to get to that sub, but it's noisier than everybody else, so it makes sense because it's noisy. There's nobody, as noisy, and gets killed. Next one, that LA rolls 3 dice. He gets a 9 up to a 10 and a natural 10. So in his natural 10, he can pick somebody, and on his 9, actually, Russian can allocate that and chooses that victor. Last sub, we roll 3 more dice. I rolled another natural 10, so we can pick that delta and go splat. So what have we got? We've got 3, 6, 9, 11, -2 that went through. That's a US. So your big noisy boats, the natural 10s are obviously good, but your big noisy boats are your liabilities, which, kind of makes sense because they're old and these deltas are probably 30 years old, 40 years old. If this guy had got up to Arctic, he'd have been able to roll some dice. You saw it in my intro where I worked out and I kind of went, okay, this Creeper's got 2 ASW points. This guy's got 3, that's 5. This guy's got another one, that's 6. And he's a carrier, that's 8. And there's a little, where it says submarine versus task force, there's a little table down there, you can reference that. And they'd actually get to roll 3 dice. So they're pretty good when they can get deployed up there. And that is actually what they were intended for, a lot of Russian assets. Even though we tend to think of the Russians as kind of big and aggressive and all that stuff, a lot of their assets were actually concerned with defending this up here, because that's their insurance. That's the only thing that stops them getting nuked. And so many of their assets were actually more concerned with defending that.
So no one has any other questions? Because if not, then we'll close it out here. Stuart, really do appreciate you taking the time to show this. And like I said before, this is kind of like one of those things where you're drinking from a fire hose, because there's a lot of data, a lot of information to take in. But like you said, play this scenario first, and then play the second and third, fourth, fifth, before going on and jumping in and playing the campaign game, because this is not a standard East Front game or West Front game. This is something you got to learn in blocks, I think, and then build it up to be able to play the entire game.
Yeah, it's quite unique. There's a lot of systems there that you don't see very often. They're kind of done in different ways, and just dumping in, yeah, you kind of drown. So what you'll find is you'll play this scenario, you play this one, and it'll be kind of slow and kind of hard work first time. But second time you run through it, you'll get really much faster, because actually you'll kind of go, okay, we get these systems now. We can move on to the next one. And the way the board interacts and everything else, you'll kind of become more obvious. So yeah, definitely don't dive into campaign.
No. And then, of course, following the player aids will definitely help. And knowing where to look on the player aids, obviously, is one of the first things you're going to have to overcome when you're playing at the game first time, because you don't know where everything is until you find it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, I streamlined quite a bit, but it's still a bit chunky game. But that's kind of some of the appeal of it as well. You got rocket torpedoes, you got little bits of chrome with, an alpha's got a non-magnetic hull and that kind of stuff. Now, we could have just took them out, but it was kind of nice to keep them in. So that's why it is like it is. The only other thing to remember is the big games, and the whole campaign is a big game. You can get away with making some mistakes. It's not end up world. You're going to roll hundreds of sets of dice during a campaign. So a couple of bad rolls is not gonna skew your experience.
Now, one last question from me to you about this is, from learning this, how much will carry over to the Blue Water Navy Pacific?
Just about all of it. So all the mechanisms are the same. The only really it's the chrome that changes. So in Blue Water Navy Pacific we've got invasions, and we kind of got invasions in this. What you do is you've got this. That's a Norwegian invasion. That's the Russians kind of coming down Norway, and we've got one down here in Denmark. And they're kind of like that, but there's a little bit more to them. So you've got like Chinese can go into Taiwan, Russians and Chinese can fight, and there's North Korea as well. So they're kind of bigger scale, really, but they resolve in similar ways. You're going to roll some dice, and you're going to move up and down a track depending on what position you're in. But yeah, all the basic mechanics. If you know one game, you'll know the next game, and they'll kind of just transfer.
Well, excellent. That makes it a good incentive to learn this one, because then we can carry it over to Blue Water Navy Pacific, which will be coming out soon, hopefully within, what was it, end of the year, maybe first of next year?
Yeah, I think that's rough schedule. Yeah, we're finishing up some bits on it now, and obviously it's got to go out, and obviously global shipping probably best not talked about, but yeah, it'll get here. Probably Q1 next year would be my guess, just because of the backlog in the factories and stuff like that.
Sure. So we got plenty of time then to learn this, and then carry it over to Pacific when that's available. One last time, again, thank you so much for doing this, Stuart. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who joined us today, and I hope you guys gained something from it, and really appreciate everybody's participation today. Thanks a lot, Stuart.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. Cheers, everybody.